What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys are doing well out there. That's right. Friday is here. The weekend is here. And so is the FAANG Stock Recap Show here on the Investor Channel, where every Friday we recap all the major news and the technical chart patterns from all the major FAANG stocks. The technical chart patterns are telling us a lot. You might want to stick around for that segment. But folks, this week we heard from Google. We heard from Tesla. Next week, we're going to hear from Meta, Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft. Buckle up. We've got a lot to get to. Kick things off like we always do with Meta Platforms. Start of the week at $491.98. This one, like a lot of these stocks, slipping down. Over 5.3% finished the week at $465.86. The company unveiled its largest version of its Llama model, this being a frontier, like a big boy model, if you will. Smaller parameter models have been released earlier this year. This is an open source model, although they've kind of tweaked the language, I believe, a little bit on the licensing terms. It's available in multiple languages. This obviously got well received. I'm flowing in the circles, I guess, of the Substacks that talk about these types of models, benchmark them against each other. For the most part, this one receiving very high scores. Again, Meta reports their earnings next week on July 31st, just 5 days from now. Moving on to Apple, start of the week at $226.77, down 3.8% as we head into earnings with Apple. That'll fall on August 1st, $218.11. was Apple's closing price this week. Now, the company is, quote, dabbling in a foldable iPhone and possible 2026 release. I don't think this surprises anybody. Apple's going to see other like Samsung and Google models that are in the marketplace. They're certainly going to test this. They're going to see if they can come to market with a type of device. It wouldn't be the iPhone, but it would be one of the models that they release if they can get that crease and that fold to be just right. Apple, with their high standards, I'd actually be surprised if they could pull this off. Now, Samsung, though, might replace Sony as Apple's image sensor supplier, as Apple's probably wringing the neck of the suppliers out there in Sony, and so Samsung may be stepping in with a lower cost bid. Now, Apple's iPhone shipments in China, they dipped in Q2 while you had domestic providers, including Huawei and others, become the top 5 vendors in the region. Apple ranking 6 with its market share slipping to 14%. That was a decrease of 2 percentage points. This is according to Canalys, I believe, which is a research firm. Now, Apple is cutting the price of its iPhone in India, not because it's not necessarily selling that well, but you had custom and duty taxes on mobile phones reduced, and so Apple passing some of those cost savings on to consumers. Moving on to Amazon. This one actually held up pretty well. Started the week at $184.23. Amazon's reporting their earnings the same day as Apple on August 1st. Amazon down basically 1% to finish the week at $182.61. Big news out of Amazon this week is the National Basketball Association rejected Warner Brothers Discovery, which has been a multi-decade long partner with TNT and maybe other brands with the NBA, and they decided to take their talents to Amazon. And Warner Brothers Discovery, which has another year under its contract. So Amazon is not going to show NBA games starting next year. It's really going to be technically next year, but the 2025-26 NBA season, not this upcoming one. So Warner Brothers Discovery is going to sue because they claim that they matched Amazon's bid, but the NBA decided to go with Amazon. They're also renewing a contract that they have with Walt Disney, and they're also bringing back NBC, which had legendary coverage of the NBA during kind of the height of the league's popularity when Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and others were playing. Now, Amazon is going to score basketball games, it appears, on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. They're going to get some play-in games and some playoff games. They're also going to be airing some Summer League games and the in-season tournament, which, as an kind of an NBA fan, I honestly haven't figured out what that is. This is all setting up not for this contract negotiation, but several years later when this contract comes up for renewal again. My guess is NBC and Walt Disney, if things continue the way they're going, Amazon will become the lead partner. And so to get them on board as quote unquote, kind of the minority streamer or network on this deal, my guess is in 4 or 5 years, if financials stay the same way for Amazon, then they will be the only one that could afford the billions of dollars the NBA will want. Now, moving on to Netflix. Start of the week at 636.48, down about 0.8% to finish the week at 631. The week after earnings, we didn't have a lot of news out of Netflix, just that NBA deal crossing in the entertainment world. Moving on to NVIDIA. Start of the week at 121.46. And hi, Joe kids. Hi, Joe wife. How did NVIDIA actually go down? It was down about 7% this week. Finished the week at 113.07. Folks, down in the description below, I've got a link to my new channel. Every YouTuber I know has like multiple channels. And we just started a new one, folks. And we've got a new show airing every weekend. I haven't nailed down if I'm going to do this on Saturdays or Sundays. Not sure if I want to commit to a day because as a family man, you might have something to do on one or the other days. But sometime on Saturday or Sunday, we're posting what we're tentatively calling the Semi-Stock Show. It's a semiconductor-focused show. Very similar to here, we do FAANG Stock Recap Show. We're going to run down all the news with NVIDIA, Intel, AMD, ARM Holdings, Qualcomm, Broadcom, all the chip makers. We go through the technical chart patterns as well. There are timestamps. If you missed out on Taiwan Semiconductor manufacturer earnings, we also had ASML earnings last week. I did videos inside this 41-minute video that you can check down in the link below. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Thanks to all of you that have already done that. Now, NVIDIA supplier SK Hynix, which is a memory supplier, they're going to invest $6.8 billion to build a new South Korean chip facility. This fabrication facility, at least in its initial phase, is expected to come online sometime in May of 2027. Now, NVIDIA is working on a new AI chip for the Chinese market. This has made news this week, but I don't really know why, only because this has been the playbook for NVIDIA over the past year. As you've had restrictions come down from the current administration here in the United States, and this is not past law, but this is stuff that is passed down from kind of the executive branch, if you will. And so what NVIDIA is having to do is they're not able to ship their kind of stock version of the H100s, or I think even like the A100 GPUs into the Chinese market. So they've created modified versions. Now, what this article doesn't really point out, and what most people didn't point out, was the fact that NVIDIA has done this in the past, and then a couple of weeks go by or a month goes by, and then you get a revised set of laws passed down from the government here in the United States that then make that new revised Chinese chip not available to sell. And so NVIDIA is doing what it can. Maybe they view the last couple of months of President Biden's administration a quote lame duck period where they might be able to get into the Chinese market. Maybe they've learned some things from the regulation over the past year. We also have big question marks, and this is something we'll probably talk in depth on our Chip Stocks show this weekend, is we have big question marks. Now we have a new candidate. We're not really sure how her stance will be on these types of things. And I tell you what, the Chinese market either staying closed or opening for the chip sector, it's doesn't just infect NVIDIA. It's the entire chip sector that is basically closed out, the high-end chip sector that is closed out of the Chinese market. Depending on which way that goes in the next administration, that has a big impact on these companies' revenue, profit, and future outlook. And we literally have no idea with either candidate how they will handle that. Now, Samsung's high bandwidth memory 3 chips, they're getting NVIDIA's nod for its China-focused AI processor, which we just talked about. Now, I believe it was last month, NVIDIA rejected Samsung's bid to get onto their latest chips, which we'll talk about here in a moment, but it looks like maybe their high bandwidth memory is good enough for the Chinese market. Now, the company is set for growth. Now, NVIDIA does not report their earnings until August 28th, so we're about a month away from hearing from NVIDIA, although next week, I do believe we're going to be hearing from, or in the next week or so, we'll be hearing from Intel and AMD, and so that kind of sets the stage, if you will, for NVIDIA. But the company is going to be pumping that they've got these fantastic new Blackwell chips, the B100 and B200. Those are set to launch in a couple of months. We'll see if anybody out there that's customers of NVIDIA maybe paused some shipments, maybe delayed some orders for these next generation chips. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case, at least from a large demand perspective, but we'll talk later in the show. Elon Musk essentially tipping his hat to NVIDIA. I think the upcoming quarter is going to be spectacular, but it could be priced in already. Now, Intel is getting its estimates in terms of revenue and profits. They're dropping ahead of earnings while AMD remains mostly unchanged. So we should get, like I said, both of these companies are slated to release their Q2 financials next week. So along with Meta, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, we'll do videos on Intel and AMD as well. In terms of Intel's estimates, the Q2 is expected to come in at 8 cents earnings. Previous estimates were closer to 10 cents. And on the revenue side, $12.74 billion as opposed to $13 billion. So analysts kind of stepping in, lowering the bar for Intel. I tell you what, if Intel comes underneath the lowered bar, well, oh my gosh, the stock will probably take a major hit, depending, again, more or less on its Q3 outlook, which also got dropped by about 10% on the EPS side. And on the revenue side, you went from $14.7 down to $14.4 billion. AMD's revenue and profit estimates basically the same. Now, moving on to Google, start of the week at 182.12, boom, down 8.2%. Finished the week at 167. I can't tell you how many times I had people ask me after Google announced their Q2 results, which were great. Great from an earnings perspective, great from a revenue perspective, great from Google Cloud perspective. YouTube, I think, was slightly underneath estimates, but for the most part was strong results. Revenue coming in at $84.7 billion, 14% growth roughly year over year. Upcoming quarters, we didn't get firm guidance from Google, but we certainly didn't get a tamping down of any expectations there. And people were like, well, why is the stock down? We'll get to the technical segment of Google and you'll see how much this stock has rallied. Just like forget since February and March of 2023, just March of this year, you've been on such a rally. Folks, there's something called results getting priced into the market, and that seems to be the case with Google. Now, people are turning away Google's checkbook as the company wanted to write a $23 billion acquisition check for this cybersecurity company, Wiz. Allegedly, that company has turned that down with the eye to potentially go public. My guess is you are going to be sitting here a year from now and the executives of Wiz are either going to be fired or they're going to be kicking themselves in the backside. I don't know how you turn down $23 billion as we head into a rate lowering cycle. If you look through the entire history of the Fed rate cut cycle, it's usually triggers some bad times in the market because they don't cut rates when things are good. But Google's not going to sit on their hands, allegedly, maybe. And sometimes this is thrown out by analysts or maybe even other shareholders that own shares. This is a public company as well, this GitLab company. This is an $8.5 billion software company. Allegedly, Google could maybe throw some dollars at this one, although they're trading at about 147 times forward earnings. So probably wouldn't be a whole lot tangible to Google's bottom line. Now, OpenAI is going to test its AI-powered search engine where it uses some of its generative AI results along with results found on the web. Google slipped, I think, more or less because of earnings, but maybe followed through on that news. Now, the company's AI models are achieving some new heights in mathematics. If you're totally geek out on these large language models, one skill that's actually maybe somewhat surprising that they're not very good at is math. It's interesting because large language models rely on complex or semi-complex matrix multiplication in order to train these models. But what's interesting is they're not able to do somewhat simple mathematician. Now, things have gotten better for the models over the past year or so. But you have the Mathematical Olympiad, which is something that I certainly couldn't compete in. But you got competition that was held annually since 1959. If you want to compete in this, you have to answer 6 complex math problems in 2 4.5-hour sessions. So you essentially get 9 hours to answer 6 questions. So Google's AI system solved 4 of the 6 problems. What's interesting, this is actually kind of interesting, is one question they answered within minutes. They snap did it. And that certainly, I would assume, probably beats almost all humans on Earth. I doubt there's that many people showing up at the Mathematical Olympiad. They get one question and they solve it within minutes. I could be wrong about that, but what's interesting is the others required 3 days, and God knows how much energy and compute power they needed. So it still looks like we're still a little ways away from Google's AI systems being able to compete or be able to solve challenging mathematical problems, but they earned what would be equivalent to a silver medal outside of the time constraints that are normally had. My guess is you're going to be sitting here a year from now, and this type of AI system could win a gold medal in the required time as well. Moving on to Microsoft, start of the week at 443, down 4%. Oh my God, you're going to want to look at Microsoft technically. 425.27. Microsoft reports their earnings just 4 days from now. They'll actually kick off earnings next week on 7:30. Normally they report the same week of Google, so we're going to be able to get Microsoft on its own day, give it a nice focused earnings report. Now, CrowdStrike outage. That raised questions about Windows' perceived vulnerability because obviously CrowdStrike went down and then it bricked a bunch of Windows PCs. So it kind of like whose operating system is the most important on your Windows PC, one that has virus protection, if you will, of CrowdStrike. Because if CrowdStrike doesn't work, then Windows doesn't work. My guess is both companies, particularly probably Microsoft, working for a workaround there. Now, Microsoft is introducing generative AI to Bing search. So the search engine competition coming from all sides for Google. But again, their report this week showed no real signs of this having any impact, being essentially a copycat of Google. What I think is interesting, and I think I have the story queued up here, is when OpenAI releases their search engine, I actually view that probably more of a competitive threat to Bing rather than Google, only because Bing has such low percentage amount of users. If any of them shift to OpenAI, it certainly can be seen. Google can just like ramp up the temperature on the amount of ads that they show, because they don't show a lot of ads actually in their search engines. I mean, if you're searching for hotels and flights and things like that, then you're bombarded. There's like not an organic result in like 3 pages on Google. But most non-competitive keywords are not even advertised against, and Google could change that and make up for any lost ground from a market share perspective. Moving on to Tesla, started the week at 250, and speaking of moving, this thing hit the accelerator in that Model Y, down 12%, down to 219.80 over the last month. Though shares of Tesla still up 14.5. So we have to kind of keep this in context that Tesla was on a monster ride. You'll see that technically. So the 12% drop, probably not the worst thing for the shares. Now, revenue came in at $25.5 billion. Here's what's bad for the shares. You had just 2.3% growth year over year. I think they're guiding or projected to do negative revenue growth in the upcoming quarter, and you've got a 90 forward multiple and a $700 billion market cap on this one. They're going to have to find growth somewhere over at Tesla. Now, the company continues to talk up robo-taxi or cyber taxi. They had to delay the event. We got a firm date on the conference call that is coming October 10th. That is pushed back from the month of August. Now, again, still, you have to pump the brakes on the robo-taxi. You're just not going to have this product roll out, create any kind of meaningful revenue, time soon. They're going to have to get regulatory clearance. They're going to have to roll this product out. I still think you're years away for the company doing anything in the robo-taxi. Now, the energy business looks absolutely fantastic. They did make a note on the conference call that it can be particularly lumpy up and down from a revenue perspective. If they can smooth that out, continue that growth rate, well, they've got a great business. I think they've got a great business no matter what, but understand that it can be a little lumpy. They're going to have to continue to discount the cards, although you get a lowering of interest rates. That'll be interesting. I think one of the most interesting things on the conference call was the fact that they mentioned NVIDIA explicitly as it relates to buying GPUs, and that the company continues to work on its Dojo supercomputer in large part because they just simply cannot get enough of NVIDIA's chips. And I guarantee you, when NVIDIA reports their earnings about a month from now, they're going to be nothing short of spectacular. Now, large majority of people want Tesla to invest in xAI. This was floated on the conference call that xAI is one of Elon Musk's companies that is working on different types of artificial intelligence, and that there could be some integration, right? If you want to have maybe some kind of user interface that uses AI, well, maybe xAI could be the kind of the backbone of that. Tesla could make maybe other devices. There's been rumored, or hopes, if you will, maybe of a Tesla phone. There's other artificial intelligence that could be used maybe in the Optimus robot that xAI could provide. And so Elon Musk floated a poll on Twitter and said, should Tesla invest $5 billion into XAI, assuming the valuation is set by several credible outside of investors? And he would need board approval and a shareholder votes in order to do this, largely because Elon Musk is essentially probably a majority owner in XAI. So he can't take one of his other public companies, take money out of that public company and go put it in there without board approval and shareholder vote. They also have to, again, get the valuation right on XAI. So Tesla shareholders that are sending over $5 billion don't feel cheated. I tell you what, no matter what happens here, or particularly if this goes down, you're going to have multiple lawsuits. Okay, this is what corporate lawyers and finance attorneys dream of, is these types of inside deals. The minute this gets approved and the $5 billion is shipped over, you're going to have lawsuits that, again, more or less make the lawyers rich, but that will be coming. I don't think this is a great idea. I think this creates a lot of conflicts from interest, but I do see the value of having artificial intelligence inside of Tesla. Also, what's interesting is, aside from Musk saying he's going to take this to the board after the poll results, we'll see what the board comes. XAI is now training its Grok AI chatbot based on X post, which is formerly Twitter. So an investment in XAI actually gets you access probably to the most valuable data on Twitter. I don't know if it's worth the $40 billion or whatever Elon Musk paid for Twitter, but those X posts are very valuable. And if XAI basically has an inside track to them, well, that could be provide some value and some competitive advantage, again, from an investment standpoint, from XAI and Tesla. Moving over to the technical segment of the show, folks, that is a rollover. I mean, look, I hear the comments every week. Oh, I don't look at the technical chart. That's like saying, guys, saying you don't look at a chart of price is like saying, hey, if you're going to go out and buy a home, you're not going to look at comps. Or if you go out and, you go buy bread and it's $85 a loaf at a grocery store, that doesn't faze you. Guys, all this is a chart of price. And when things get to a certain price, certainly $85 loaves of bread, well, they would sit on the shelf for a while. And S&P 500 at 5660 is going to sit on the shelf and not get bid up. So we have, at least in the shorter term, a little bit of a rollover at a predictable pattern. What's of note is you've gotten back into what I consider kind of this upper channel, depending on how you want to draw this in. I try to adjust the lines very much, but we've no matter how you slice it, you more or less have probably come back into this channel. Resumptions back to the middle, 5,200, further down, anything south of 5,000 would be very interesting. And again, we've got Meta, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Intel, AMD reporting earnings. And oh my goodness, it is going to be very, very, very tasty from a technical perspective. The other technical move you're kind of looking at is, yes, since November of 2023, you've actually been making that steep uptrend as well. So if you do hold, higher highs probably coming as soon as next week on the S&P 500. Now, Meta, like we said, reports their earnings 5 days from now, 7/31. Thought we could set up at the top of the range. No, we actually hit that well before earnings, and now here we are at an area of support right about 450. If you break through 450 with Meta, jump up and down. Be excited. Fill this gap. Anywhere south of 420 on this one is an exciting day, is a buying opportunity, assuming that the fundamentals, and we assume they probably won't, over at Meta haven't deteriorated to any significant degree. Now, Apple absolutely looking like it is made a top up here at 237. A retreat back to 196 is the first area where you're interested in Apple. And quite frankly, you could easily hit that when the company reports their earnings next week on August 1st. Amazon reports their earnings the same day as Apple on August 1st. Interesting that Amazon is sitting right on a bed of support right here in this 175, we'll call it even as high as $180 range. You break lower than that, you've got opportunities in this one, particularly down here south of 175. That would be your buying opportunity with Amazon. Netflix reached a high up here at $700. No surprise. It was not able able to push through that. We're making pullbacks in Netflix, and we are looking to buy that one. Probably not at the current time. NVIDIA continues to retreat from its highs. It's now under its 50-day moving average, which is this black line. The black line has rolled over. That's usually a sign of continuing momentum down, although the wild card, I tell you what, if we didn't have earnings next week, you probably would go short like half of these stocks, or like almost all of them. You would just continue to play the downward momentum. But since you have so much unknown information and unknown guidance and all that type of stuff that's going to cross next week, you're really just kind of sitting on your hands and you're watching this one. Any continued momentum down on NVIDIA, and you're literally going to not just be pounding on the table, but you're probably going to be jumping on it to actually step in there and buy. Now, here's the thing I want to point out with Google. I had so many people leave me a comment, ask me a question, well, why did Google go down? Folks, from March of 2024, we're not talking about March of last year. We're talking about March a couple of months ago. Google is up 45% since March, not March of last year. You want to go back to March of last year? Okay, we'll do that. March of last year, Google is up freaking 100%. But just from March of this year, Google is up 45%, and it's done absolutely nothing to deserve that type of run. So yeah, everything was priced in. Sundar Pichai could have claimed he was Jesus Christ reborn, and the stock would have had to pull back. We are getting areas with Google. The first one that's kind of interesting, I assume is kind of a backtest at the top of the channel. That would be here at 166. You might nibble at that area. Further down, though, particularly south of, I would say, really that level. Anything south of 165. And yeah, you're loving your life with Google. Now, here's the chart of the day. We'll even shrink this down a little bit because I want to get this whole view in here. Here's Microsoft. We've been making an upper trend line since November of 2022. And look here, folks, you have just not only closed below it, but kind of confirmed it today. You did put up a green candle. Did I step in and buy Microsoft? Not in a long position, not in a heavy way, but in a trading account. Yeah. Got Microsoft reporting their earnings in 4 days. I don't think there's any reason to believe they're bad. If they are bad, you know, look, you lose a couple of bucks on a trade, and you get better opportunities probably on a long position to get here and buy. You've got support with Microsoft down here at 388. So if it gets really bad on those earnings, you get those guidance during the conference call, you probably will have a move down here. If they happen to surprise to the upside, you're probably having a large reactionary move back on trend in this one. Probably $60, $70 higher. So there's some beta opportunities in Microsoft. And then finally, Tesla had a rough week with earnings, created a gap in the chart. But for the most part, here's the trend that I'm looking at with Tesla. Still making higher highs, higher lows. I know you stretch this out to intermediate term, longer term. It paints a different story. But shorter term with Tesla, you're not overly concerned. There should be support, which is historically right here at about 207 on the shares. I don't think the story is going to get incrementally better with Tesla, but a lot of the bad news and kind of the doom and gloom with Tesla is already more or less known. I don't think it can get any worse from an interest rate perspective, which is what people use to obviously finance the vehicles. I don't think the robo-taxi story can get hyped up any more than it is, but it certainly could create some different headlines as we move into October. They could certainly accelerate those type of things. And then the wild card is Optimus. If they can actually roll that out in its factory and actually demonstrate that it's useful, well, that will create a dramatic amount of excitement because there will be a lot of industrial uses for the humanoid robot if Tesla is able to pull it off. And the reasons why I'm excited about the humanoid robot is Tesla has everything in place to be able to pull that product off, whereas almost no other company in the world actually has all of that. The manufacturing, the battery, the design, the leadership, the AI, all of that stuff Tesla has, the cameras, the vision, everything. They also have internal use cases for the humanoid robot inside of their factories, making the cars and moving things around a factory. Whereas if you look at Amazon or Samsung or Google or any of these other companies, they have bits and pieces of the pie. Tesla has it all. I'm telling you, forget about the robo-taxi. Forget about the car business even to a certain degree. It's going to be all about that Optimus robot. If Tesla can pull that off, you're looking at a company that is dramatically undervalued. If they don't pull that off, you're looking at an electric vehicle car company that is priced at an absolute premium to anything else in the market. Folks, that was FAANG Stock Recap Show here on the Investor Channel. Join us over on Equity Empire for a semiconductor stock show. We'll talk more about NVIDIA. We'll talk more about the technical chart, the rotation out of the chip sector. We'll give you a preview of AMD and Intel earnings. We'll talk more about some of the smaller semiconductor stocks which reported earnings this week. I'll see you this weekend. Until then, good luck with your investments.